So, how do you make up for financial mistakes? Today, we're going to take a look. Stay tuned for Prudent Money. Good afternoon and welcome to the Prudent Money Radio Show. I'm your host, Bob Brooks. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. Well, so how do you make up for financial mistakes? CEO of Crown and author Chuck Bentley is here today to share some insight. Chuck, always good to talk to you.
Well, thank you, Bob. I'm a pretty good expert at financial mistakes, so we'll have a lot to talk about today.
Well, you know, it's interesting, and I love this topic. I really do, because you talk to people about things that have happened to them in their lives, and they look at their mistakes, and there's just so much regret versus what does God give me as a return on that mistake, so that I'll be better for having made it. And I think that people look at other people and go, boy, they got it all together financially. You have no idea. I mean, there's so many backstories that of people, because money is so toxic. So I'm really glad we're talking about this. I was joking around with Chuck ahead of time. I said, did you talk to my wife about this? Because I think I've made every mistake on this page, plus I could add some real creative ones.
Yeah, me too, Bob. And I don't want my wife to ever be interviewed by you, because she tells the truth. I try to spin it a little bit in my favor, but she'll just tell you how bad that I really was. In fact, I remember, this is years ago. I don't think it happens anymore, but a credit card company sent me a bundle of checks, so that, I don't know why it made a difference, but you could write a check, but it was really a credit card, and the interest rate was 25%, and I had 10 checks in the bundle, and I used all 10 of those checks, Bob. I look back and I think, what was I thinking? A 25% interest rate, and somehow I thought it was a good idea, and my wife was just aghast that I did it.
Oh, been there, done that. Hid it from my wife. So.
Oh no!
Yeah, that's a whole nother program that we could do. Not keeping your wife up with the finances and all that. But let's start with probably my favorite one, my favorite mistake, and this one had me written all over it when I got out of college. Because nobody, it's funny, nobody really took the time to sit down and explain this to me, even though it's very common sense. But spending more than you earn. And, fortunately, and I know that you're probably seeing this too, this is something that people in their 20s are doing so much better at than we did in our generation.
Yeah, I think you're right about that, Bob. I think there's a lot more awareness of the need to budget and to live beneath your means, especially during a time of high inflation, when if you make a mistake now, you might not be able to afford groceries. Back when I was doing it, because I'm optimistic, Bob,
yes,
and my wife,
yes.
Sometimes, she doesn't understand why I'm so optimistic or why I have such sort of overconfidence, as she calls it. But I always thought I could out-earn whatever I spend.
Oh, my gosh.
Whatever I spend,
so
I'll
true.
just out-earn it. I'll get a bonus, I'll get a raise, I'll get another commission. It's kind of that mentality that you don't have to live that way, and it was sort of a constraint to my desires to think I might have to limit what I spend. I literally hated the topic of budgeting when she would bring it up. Like, we need to live within our means. And I was like, oh, it'll be all right. It'll be all right. Just trust me. Well, she regrets trusting me, Bob, because it wasn't all right. It became extraordinarily painful. And it took some real hard lessons for me to learn that it is the number one issue when it comes to financial management. If you spend $1 more than you earn, it's going to create enormous stress. I was spending hundreds of dollars every month more than we were taking in, and just going backwards financially. And I just kept digging the hole. It's like you would think at some point you'd just stop digging. I just kept digging.
Oh, yeah.
It sounds like you've done the same thing, Bob.
Well, and the problem with this one is that you do it over and over and over with this horrible assumption that I'm going to earn this money to pay for it. You know, you're spending money you haven't even earned yet, and it develops into this horrible habit. It's the go-to decision making that you go through, and what a horrible habit that creates.
Did your wife help you put the brakes on that, Bob, or was it just a painful lesson?
It was a painful lesson.
Let's just be honest.
Yeah, I mean, it really was.
Yeah, I mean, for me too. I went through terrible pain, and I mean, at one point we had to go to a cash only budget, like envelopes, because I just couldn't break the habit, and my wife insisted that we do it so that I mean, here I am. I have the privilege of teaching people. I do radio twice a day on this topic, but it took horrible pain and my wife and the Lord's conviction to get me to stop doing it.
Well, but you know what? That I think it gives you the gift of empathy when you talk to other people. I mean, God prepared you for a day like this, and totally, Bob. I've heard it said, "Out of your misery comes your ministry." Oh, yeah.
And so that's what's happened to me.
I have a very large ministry. lots of misery.
I have a lot of empathy. I have a very large capacity for empathy.
So let's move on to the second one, and of course this is a really big problem in America, and you can just look at statistically, and you can tell. And something else that's very worrisome to kind of to dovetail off of this, I'll get back to in a second, is that the number of people who are using credit cards today to get by, and record credit card amounts over $1 trillion. Well, this is where you go if you don't have an emergency account.
I think many people see their credit card as their emergency fund.
Yes, I would agree.
In other words, if they pay down a little of the balance, if they've got $1,000 or $2,000 left on their balance, that's where they go to. And they sort of manage that wave of running up a balance, paying down a balance, running it up, paying it down, as a form of their own bank. It's like they look at it like a bank. The problem is it's the highest interest you can pay on money if you look at it as your bank. Mm-hmm. It is much better to have your own emergency savings account. That is basically an interest-free or an interest-earning form of banking. And when I began to see the emergency savings account as having a bank where I could get money as I needed it and not have to use the credit card, that really changed everything. My cost went down because I wasn't paying interest on a credit card. I was earning money on the emergency savings account, and if I had to pay an expense, then I could do it without, and sometimes get a discount for paying cash on the spot. And so emergency savings account changed everything. It reduced our stress. It allowed us to think deeply before we spent money and to try to avoid being unprepared. And once we started doing that, we got a whole lot better with managing everything that we had to manage.
You know, it's interesting. It was almost like that was a turning point for y'all.
It was.
And
it was.
This third one, this is very interesting. I've never thought about this, and it's one of the things that I've been so hesitant to do because I know it's cheaper than having a satellite. I know it's way more effective, but just letting go of the satellite and going on streaming TV services. But you say that the mistake is streaming services that waste time and money on entertainment. Talk a little bit about this.
Well, the CNBC report said that the average consumer is spending $133 a month more on subscriptions than they realize. It's like out of sight, out of mind. It's just hitting the credit card every month. And a lot of times they're not even using it. But 85% of Americans have at least one video streaming subscription. 60% have at least one music streaming subscription. And a lot of times we have more than we even realize, and they get out of control. I have one that we subscribe to for, it's sort of accountability for what your children are watching online. And we've had that for years, and they just said they're going up to like triple the monthly amount. And if I wasn't paying attention, we would just keep letting that thing run, and we don't need it now. And they make it hard to cancel. It's really hard and arduous. But we're canceling, and I'll be down to one subscription. But most people are letting that run. And it's not only wasting money, but we don't need that much entertainment. Right. And the cost is the time that people spend on entertainment that could be used more productively.
Well, and the phrase that comes to mind when you look at these streaming services is immediate gratification. All you do is you sign up for it, it hits your credit card, and wow, you've got all this pretty entertainment sitting in front of you that you can choose from, which you, like you say, don't necessarily have the amount of time needed to invest into the entertainment. Could be used for something else. But I could see where that is an easy thing to get behind the eight ball. You just kind of continue to add. They get lost in the billing cycle. $8 here, $10 here, $12 here. It all adds up.
Well, what most of them do is they'll give you 7 days for free, but you have to sign up for, the auto renewal. So if you miss that 7 days, not only does it hit your credit card that month, but it'll just keep churning and churning and churning. And Bob, Ann and I stopped watching TV probably 30 years ago. We don't have television. We have a television set, and we'll occasionally watch a movie together. But I don't have any cable subscriptions. I don't have any streaming services now and we just don't sit and watch television. And what it has allowed us to do is to invest our time differently. Ann has no idea how I keep up with college football because I don't watch a game. And I'll read after the game who won. I'll kind of keep up in my mind a team I might be following, or I might watch a highlight on YouTube. But if somebody talks to me about football, I'm fairly informed, but I don't watch it. And I haven't been to a college football game, I don't know, in 20 years, Bob. But I just don't spend a lot of money on entertainment.
This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Chuck Bentley's with me today. Listen, if you have not done so, crown.org. I wish we had lots of time today to talk about what they're doing over there, but God is using that ministry to change a lot of financial lives and a lot of lives, period. Go check out all the resources they have on their site, crown.org. And also 2 really good books that I think you need to be reading. First one is 7 Gray Swans, Trends That Threaten Our Financial Future. And we've got a lot to talk about today, and I stuck some currency questions on the end of the end of it. And I said, Chuck probably won't get there, but there's just so much to talk about. But this book covers everything that you may be worrying about when you don't need to be worrying about once you get a real good understanding. The other book is Economic Evidence for God. And both of those books are, you can find them on crown.org. This next one is, I kind of call it the cycle. And I think back to college when really the credit boom started back in the 80s, early 80s. And, you could get 5, 6 credit cards, and you really didn't know what to do with them. But, man, you could charge them up, and they would send you a really nice note if you were late paying your bill. And, it just starts out so innocent, Chuck. You start with a balance here. The cycle goes on to where you You're very comfortable with that balance. You extend that balance a little bit bigger, then you go to another card, and you get into this habit of immediate gratification and just charging on that card. And next thing you know, you wake up and you've got cards with big balances on them. And it's once again, a habit, a bad habit. And I think so many people, the vast majority of America, is stuck in that habit.
Well, the vast majority of Americans, I mean, the average right now is a $10,000 balance on credit cards. That's the national average. That means a lot of people have more than that, more than $10,000 of balance. And what's the hidden danger of it is that's the highest cost borrowing you could possibly have.
Yeah.
I mean, the rates are trending towards 22 to 25%. And if you do the math, Bob, if you're carrying a balance of that size and you're paying the minimum monthly payment and you go out and you have pizza or something and maybe you add another $50 on it and you think, oh, that's no big deal. Well, you'll be paying on that $50 for, I think, 21 years. And so you've basically mortgaged a pizza. And that makes no sense to me. It makes no sense at all. Right. Stop doing that. Stop carrying that balance. Get out of that as soon as you can. As you say, it's a cycle. I call it juggling credit cards, where you're just sort of, you got 4 or 5 going, you try to keep the balance down on one, and, you just are fighting an uphill battle constantly.
This next one I kind of got a chuckle out of because I think this is really a problem for so many people. This actually has not ever been a problem for me, but taking expensive vacations. And it's a tough one because you see all your friends taking them. Your kids see their friends going on them. They go maybe 1 or 2 times a year. And I sit there and think to myself, how can people do that? And because it's just so, and especially today, vacations are so expensive. How do you get?
I don't know how they do it. I don't know how they do it.
I don't either. And you got 4 boys, right?
Yeah,
and that's expensive.
I don't think we ever purchased a plane ticket for all of our family at the same time, like 6 of us going somewhere ever. It was always driving. It was always a simple close-in vacation, something that was really affordable. I read that the average person with, I think they said $2 million of net worth, they surveyed what do they spend on an annual vacation, and their average is $4,000 a year if you have a $2 million net worth. Well, to me, that means I need to spend a whole lot less than that on an annual vacation.
Right.
And I are just careful with that. We can have a great time just doing things that don't cost a lot of money and still feel refreshed and renewed. And I don't know how people say they've got their annual trip to, say, Disneyland, and you look at the cost of doing that, and they're going to spend $5,000 taking the kids to Disneyland.
Easily.
I don't know how people do it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's you get back to school. So what'd you do this summer? Well, not really anything. Did y'all go anywhere? No, not really.
Yeah.
So it's and the thing is, it dovetails off of credit cards.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Just almost every time.
Yeah.
The next one is something that is a really interesting process today, being with supply and demand and the inflationary environment we're in, but buying a new car. And talk a little bit about that, because that is something it's been interesting to watch the statistics throughout the pandemic and who's buying cars, who's not, how much pre-owned cars are going up. But it is not cheap, and buying a new car is somewhat of a loser's game.
Well, if you buy a new car today and you finance it, you're going to have an average of about $750 a month in a car payment, and that's over 5 years, probably, maybe even 6 years. 25% of new car purchases require $1,000 a month car payment. And my view is that really most of us can't afford it. because the depreciation. Now, the car market's a little upside down because of the pandemic, and I realize that. And sometimes it's easier to just buy new than to buy used due to what's available and some of the cost differentials. However, if the market is normalized, my contention is that most people can't afford to lose that much in depreciation by buying new. We've been buying 2 or 3 year old used cars for years now. Mm-hmm. And if you take good care of them, what ends up happening is your cost per mile driven goes lower and lower and lower. And that's how I judge the cost of a car. How much did it cost me to drive each mile? And that's the difference between what you bought it for, what you're able to sell it for, its resale value, and what it cost you in the interim for maintenance. And I try to drive down my cost per mile to very, very low.
Well, and you're looking at it, how do I manage a necessity? Because the car gets us to work. I mean, it's important. And I think it's of course, it's a huge difference managing it that way, which is a prudent, if I might use that word, way to go about it from the standpoint of stewardship versus managing a luxury. And right. There's always someone that'll finance you.
That's right. And I look at a car as, does it get me to point A and B without breaking down? Will it always start? And can it go the speed limit comfortably and get good gas mileage? If it does all those things, it doesn't have to have all the bells and whistles. One of the better stewards that I know in the world today drives a car with crank windows, and I didn't even know you could find
crank windows. How old is this car?
I mean, it's stunning. When we went to lunch, I thought, I haven't been in crank windows. I don't know how old it was, but it was. You know, he could afford anything. He could afford a Lamborghini, and he said, "Yeah, I don't really need those power windows." And I thought, well, yeah, it still works. You can roll it up and down. How often do we drive with the window down anyway? But the point is that we get caught up in materialism. We get caught up in designer cars. We get caught up in fashion trends, and we want the latest technology on these cars and things, and we just overspend when we really don't need to.
Yeah, and boy, there's a whole topic of discussion sitting right there in front of us. We need to cover at some point. I think if I got into the car and saw that, the first thing that would probably blurt out of my mouth before I spoke, does that really work?
Yeah,
I remember that as a kid, you know.
Yeah.
Well, Chuck, once again, I want to make sure that I mentioned Crown.org. Like I said, Crown is doing. I've had the blessing of coordinating about 6 or 7 different class periods. How many weeks are they again? I can't remember. It's been a while.
Well, we have.
Y'all probably changed it up. You probably changed it up since I've done that.
Yeah, we used to do 12-week courses, and now the standard is 10 weeks.
But what a great ministry, a great resource. So go check that out at crown.org and see what they've got to offer. But Chuck, it's such a pleasure to talk to you today, and always is. And just wish God's blessings for you and Ann.
Keep up the great work, Bob. We appreciate all that you do, helping people to be prudent with money. And I hope when they hear you on the air that they look you up and allow you to be their financial advisor.
Well, thank you, Chuck. God bless.
God bless. Bye-bye.
This is Bob Brooks. If you got a question for me, please go to the website at prudentmoney.com and send it in, because we are all out of time. Till we do meet again next time. Keep the faith and have a great rest of the day.